One, I think it'll be a long time before we know what happened. Two, there are bound to be all kinds of conspiracy theories.
They're popping up online, like, did the plane land on a remote island? Did a meteor take the plane down? There was actually a known meteor in the area at the time the plane took off. Could it have hit the plane?
When a spectacular event happens, I think it's human nature to try and find some sort of cause that explains something mysterious.
The fate of Flight 370 has become a worldwide obsession. As the mystery deepens, the theories are multiplying, and anxious flyers are wondering, could it happen again? Well, joining me now, Patrick Smith, host of AskThePilot.com and author of Cockpit Confidential. Everything you need to know about air travel. Also, Arnold Barnett. He's professor of statistics at MIT. And Jeff Wise, a contributor to Slate and author of Extreme Fear, The Science of Your Mind in Danger. Jeff Wise, let me come to you first. I just read your piece before I came on air. Absolutely fascinating theory. Just tell me, in brief terms, what that theory is and why you think it could hold some credence here.
Well, it sounds a little bit outlandish, but, you know, as time goes by and the obvious answers don't pan out, you start to have to turn to some of the more unlikely seeming possibilities. And basically what some pilots are talking about, I'm hearing, is the idea that perhaps the pilot or co-pilot of this plane took control of the cockpit, either incapacitated or killed the other pilot, locked the door, there's a deadbolt, you can lock everyone else out, turn off as much electronics as he could, dive the plane, and head out. And now it just so happens, coincidentally, that, or perhaps not coincidentally, that where this plane vanished or was last spotted was a patch of ocean where electronic communication was very poor. It's a sort of a dead area between the ground stations where if you were to suddenly turn off your electronics and make a dash for it, that would be the perfect place to do it. It might just be a coincidence, but if it was intentional, that would be the place to do it. So it would imply a certain level of sophistication on the part of the perpetrator, if there was a perpetrator. Obviously, this is all
right. But in your piece, which I thought was very, what I thought was very interesting in your piece was you went on to say, you know, who would want a plane like this? Well, they're worth £37 million, and there are plenty of people in dodgy regimes around the world that would probably love to get their hands on one. So there is a huge potential market for a modern, sophisticated plane like this.
Well, absolutely. And who knows? I mean, who knows what the motive is to do something like this? The point of the piece was just to say, to investigate the question, could it be done? And I think the answer is, well, there's no reason why it couldn't be done that we know of so far. Obviously, the clues are still emerging. I just watched Captain Phillips by chance last night, and, you know, there's that other element. You've got, you know, over 200 souls on board this plane that are worth something to somebody.
Let me go to Arnold Barnett. I should just clarify, $37 million, not pounds. Forgot where I was for a moment. Arnold Barnett, in terms of statistics, this is your area of expertise at MIT. Statistics don't always answer stories, obviously, but what is the most likely theory or theories based on statistics about all the information we now know?
Well, the statistics don't offer any clear indication of what's happened, partly because we're not even sure of the facts. The event that seems to me most similar to this, or might be most similar to this, involved Ethiopian Airlines in 1996 when hijackers stormed the cockpit, demanded to be taken someplace that was unattainable given the fuel on the plane, but wouldn't let the pilots land. What happened was that when the plane was just about to run out of fuel, the pilot attempted an emergency landing in the sea in shallow water. Some passengers did survive, but the vast majority on board were killed. It is conceivable that we are in a situation like that, where the pilots were ordered to do something that they couldn't do. But again, there are other precedents. I'm sorry.
No, please continue. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
As far as suicide, we have had suicides, but in those cases, it seemed that as soon as the opportunity arose, the pilots plunged the plane into the ground. Whereas here, there's talk about having been off course for something like 4 or 5 hours. So I would agree with those who are skeptical of the theory that the pilots themselves were committing suicide.
Okay, stay with me, panel. We'll come back. We'll get to Patrick Smith and get your theory on this. Everyone has a theory. I want to hear yours. You're obviously very well informed about planes and air travel. I'm interested to hear what you have to think after the break. story of Flight 370 consumes us all, but why? Well, last year was the safest year in airline travel to date. So why so obsessed with our fear of flying? I'm back with Patrick Smith, Arnold Barnett and Jeff Wise. Patrick Smith, you're an airline pilot. What do you make? I mean, everyone's got a theory. I've got a theory that changes every hour on this based on the latest reports and so on. What is your best advised, best informed theory? It can be no more than that.
I'm not sure that I have one. You know, Mr. Wise's suggestion, I think, is something that's conceivable, and we're hearing a lot of these conceivable ideas, but although they're conceivable, they're not very likely. And meanwhile, you know, to me, I think the most fascinating aspect of this story now is that it's become, for lack of a better term, transcendent. And by that I mean it's no longer a story about an airplane crash. It's a mystery story, and people are watching it the way they watch a celebrity murder trial. And now the verdict, so to speak, isn't guilty or not guilty. It's going to be where and when do they find the airplane. And my theory there is once that happens, the story loses its mojo and nobody cares anymore, which is unfortunate for a couple of reasons. One, being the fact that the questions we really should be asking are what happened on board the airplane. That's the question we should be asking, not where is the airplane. And I'm afraid when we get to that point, assuming we do, people are going to lose interest.
Well, look, okay, let me jump in. Let me jump in, because I think that, you know, we're running a banner now saying conspiracy theories. Some of them are conspiracy theories. Some of them are perfectly, in my view, perfectly reasonable theories to be airing and debating. Everybody is speculating, but surely it's better to speculate and perhaps try collectively with all the brain power we can amass to unearth plausible theories that could be investigated than the current situation, which is even the world's finest aviation experts working at airlines around the world haven't got a clue.
Well, I think what's happening is the lack of evidence is just inspiring people and pushing people to these more fringe theories because they don't know what else to come up with. And to some extent, that's the age that we live in. This has become kind of human nature for us. You know, the internet is all part of
but
that.
again, Patrick, let me jump in again there, because I think it's quite an important point you're making, and some people may agree with this. But again, I say to you, what else is expected to happen when you have such conflicting reports from the Malaysian authorities who are responsible for this investigation, who tell us one thing one day, one the next? I had a heart-rending interview with the wife of one of the passengers last night, absolutely tear-jerking interview, and I want her to get answers. I want her to be treated better than she's being treated, and I think that trying to explore the theories can possibly be helpful. I don't see it as anything other than a rational response by people, given the appalling behaviour of the authorities.
Could I
jump in, Jeff Wise? Jeff Wise, yeah.
You know, you alluded to, you know, the importance of facts getting out. And there's been a lot of complaints. I've been following the coverage, a lot of complaints about the Malaysian authorities. And look, they're not the United States. We have the most advanced communications and transportation infrastructure in the world. We've got a fantastic NTSB. It's unfair to judge the Malaysians on the basis of our own agency. And people who are complaining about the Malaysians now, the reason that the Malaysians are in charge of the investigation now is that nobody knows where the plane is, and it's a Malaysian flag carrier. The instant that that plane turns up somewhere else, it will become the jurisdiction of that country. So if this plane turns up in Burma, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, or wherever it may turn up, there's a lot of places that are going to be way worse than Malaysia. And so I think we should go a little bit easy on criticizing the Malaysians.
Well, I'm not so sure about that, because I think that, have you spoken to this poor woman last night? I think we should be going harder on the Malaysians, actually, and tell them to get their act in gear and to start producing some proper evidence, and if they have something that is cogent, to put it out there quickly.
What I'm saying is, though,
to treat the poor families sitting there waiting for news in a better way than they are currently doing. So I don't agree with that. Let me go back to Arnold Barnett. Statistically, again, this is purely based on what has happened in the past. I get that. But of all these scenarios, pilot suicide, commandeering, hijacking, mechanical failure, the totally bizarre, a meteorite hitting it, who knows? Of all these theories, what is statistically, from everything that we can see from analysis, the most likely?
That's a very difficult question to answer, because any numbers I would give you or assessments are themselves, after all is said and done, opinions. I would say that the facts that have emerged now seem to me to make it implausible that this was an accident, that it seems more plausible that something deliberate happened, whether it was the pilots or those who forced themselves on the pilots. We can look in the past and see examples of both. I would tend, if you wanted me to make a guess, and it's really just a guess, I would guess that the pilots were under duress and they were forced into actions that may ultimately have led to the destruction of the plane.
Well, that certainly seems to be the theory that the US authorities... Well, just to remind people of our story at the top of this show, Barbara Starr, CNN correspondent, reporting that the US authorities believe there is a highly likely probability, from all that they have assessed, that the plane is lying at the bottom of the Indian Ocean. We just don't know that. That's not been established as a fact, but that is the theory the American administration is working on, certainly. To my panel, thank you all very much. The families of the 239 people on board Flight 370, these 6 days have been absolute agony.